And it sounds awful to say, but I do wonder if we overuse the word bullying.
Let's ask Jamie. Researcher Dr. Jamie Stewart from Victoria University joining us. Hello, Jamie.
Hello there.
Yes, what is bullying? It's a fair question, isn't it?
It is an absolutely fair question, and one that I agree is a bit misunderstood and maybe liberally used. From an academic point of view, and I know that we don't often trust those points of view, but there is a definition of what bullying behaviours actually are. And it requires 3 different characteristics. The first one is that the bully intends to harm the victim, and I think this is something that's often not taken into account. The second one, is that it's repeated behaviour, so it's kind of systematic. It happens over time.
Yeah.
And the third one is that there's an imbalance in power. So some situations like the one that you were just talking about probably aren't bullying.
No, they don't sound like bullying.
I would agree, yeah.
Okay. So were the children aware that all those 3 criteria had to be present when they answered?
No, absolutely not. And the study in which the article that was in the New Zealand Herald was based on didn't actually ask kids, are you bullied? So this is something that we need to take into account. But what it asked them was a series of behaviours that are bullying types of behaviours. That is, being physically assaulted or threatened, being verbally abused. So behaviours like that, which we consider to be bullying behaviours, but aren't necessarily perceived that way by the child themselves.
Okay, but you're saying that the children were reporting behaviours that you would consider bullying, basically? Yeah.
That are considered to be bullying, yeah.
But they might have just said this did happen to me, but if it's not repeated and if there's not an imbalance in power, would that be taken into account in the final?
So the TIN study, what they asked was that this is happening to them on a weekly basis.
Right.
So that does have the repeated element of it. But the imbalance in power one is a little bit more difficult to assess and to get from kids' points of view, because a lot of power and bullying comes from the social relationships. That is, the peers themselves, like other people who are laughing at it, or that the victim themselves actually feels powerless in that situation.
Do you think social media has an impact on this? I mean, if you can express any point of view that you want on Twitter, Facebook, whatever, and you respond in a way that's, not the way that we were all taught to have discussions when we were kids. How long before that becomes the physical response that you adopt as well?
That's such a good question. Cyberbullying, or things that happen online and things that happen in person, particularly for young people, they're not separate from one another.
Yep.
So we often think that the cyberbullies are people that you don't know. Maybe they're trolls or other people out there, but they're not. Cyberbullies tend to know their victim. This is, for the most part, some people just do it to everyone because they feel like it. And I think that the ability to act out in a negative way is much more available online and in social media than it is in person.
Jamie, we're going to have this conversation because I think we need to have a longer one another day, but thank you so much, Jamie Stewart.
No problem.
Dita DeBoni, nice to have you.
Sorry, I talked too long tonight.
Not at all.
Thank
John
you.
Barnett.
Thanks.
A pleasure. Checkpoint right now.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint we're going to go live to Napier, where the fire service is responding to a hazardous, out-of-control fire at the Ravensdown fertiliser plant. Have police been diverted from organised crime to respond to burglaries at the Police Minister's request? And if so, is that merely window dressing? Assistant Police Commissioner Viv Rickard joins us. Dressed in white, tens of thousands of Colombians have filled a football stadium because the team that should be playing there was in that terrible plane crash. And New Zealand students come bottom of the English-speaking world in an international maths exam, but is streaming to blame. Plus, Kaikoura, when will the whale watching begin again? All of that and more coming up after the news at 5.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. Fire crews from all over Hawke's Bay are racing towards a toxic fire at a fertiliser plant just south of Napier. The fire broke out in a 5-storey storage shed containing as much as 1,000 tonnes of sulphur at Ravensdown's Awatoto plant at about 2:15. Michael Kropp reports.
The fire service says its staff are wearing breathing apparatus and it is worried about the risk of toxic smoke from the sulphur blowing across the road. Its shift manager Mike Wanoa says the response is now at its highest level and crews from across the region are now on their way to the scene. Mr Wanoa says he is not sure whether the sulphur could explode. The Hawke's Bay District Health Board is sending a public health officer to the scene to assess the risk. The police have cordoned off roads in the area, including State Highway 2. They say anyone travelling between Napier and Hastings will need to take the Napier-Hastings Expressway. Ko Michael Kropp tēnei.
The District Health Board is urging people living near Awatoto or downwind of the Ravensdown factory to close windows and doors and to turn off air conditioning units. The Medical Officer of Health, Nick Jones, says smoke from the fire and the burning sulphur could exacerbate breathing issues such as asthma or bronchitis. Dr Jones says anyone experiencing breathing difficulties should get medical help. The Police Minister has seen no evidence of officers being diverted from organised crime to respond to burglaries. A frontline police officer claimed in the union's monthly newsletter that a squad had been shut down and staff were being drawn away from general duties. The officer described diverting resources to attend burglaries as robbing Peter to pay Paul and said police were at rock bottom and chasing their tails. During question time, Judith Collins said the only report she'd seen about an organised crime squad being closed was in the anonymous column by the officer. The Human Rights Commission supports demands that there be an independent inquiry into the abuse of children while in state care. The Disability Rights Commissioner, Paul Gibson, says the Commission agrees with Judge Carolyn Henwood that the inquiry is needed. The government has rejected calls for an inquiry, but Mr Gibson says it's needed to ensure the abuse of children in state care never happens again. He says New Zealanders deserve to know the extent of the abuse suffered by thousands of children over many years. Mr Gibson says there also needs to be a government apology to the survivors and their families. Pilots are welcoming the imprisonment of a Christchurch man who endangered passenger aircraft with a high-powered laser pointer. Taine Hemopo was sentenced in the Christchurch District Court today to 10 weeks in prison. The 39-year-old had admitted 2 charges of causing unnecessary danger to people on board an aircraft. Eva Collette reports.
The man was originally charged with recklessly shining a laser light at a passenger plane and the airport control tower. He pleaded guilty to 2 new charges of causing unnecessary danger to the people on board a Virgin Airlines passenger plane and a New Zealand Post metro liner. The president of the New Zealand Airline Pilots Association, Tim Robinson, says members hope the sentence will serve as a deterrent to others. He says that lasers are not toys, and pilots and air traffic controllers are concerned it's only a matter of time before lasers cause a serious accident. This is Eva Collette.
Maths and education researchers say grouping children according to their ability in maths is harming their performance. New Zealand's Year 5 and Year 9 students' maths scores in the Trends in Maths and Science study were the worst in the English-speaking world. The co-director of the Centre of Excellence for Research in Mathematics Education at Massey University, Glenda Anthony, says the ability grouping for maths lessons is part of the problem.
We need to really move away from this idea of ability grouping, which just reinforces the notion of fixed ability or some children can't learn maths and some children can learn maths, to a way that everybody's a learner.
Glenda Anthony says ability groups ensure poor performers are not extended and reduce the amount of teaching that happens in the classroom. The Kaikoura quake has thrown many real estate agents' deals around the region into turmoil. Kaikoura woman Lynn Hasty has pulled her rental off the market because her family needs to live in it after their home was damaged. Real estate agent Joe Van Royen has cemented 3 deals since November the 14th, but 7 others now need more work, such as geotechnical checks. In Oararo, 2 would-be sellers say uncertainty about road access is a deterrent to selling, and one thinks it could take years to attract buyers back. It's 5 past 5. To sport, and the New Zealand Breakers captain Mika Vikona says his teammate Corey Webster has let the side down. Webster has been charged with assault after allegedly getting into an altercation at a Takapuna bar. Today the club suspended Webster for one game, not for the arrest but for breaking team values by being out late and his lack of communication following his arrest yesterday morning. Vikona says Webster knows he's disappointed the entire team.
In terms of team values, obviously, that's where the disappointment came through. Communication or lack of, something that we've tried to build for a while now, and we'll just have to grow up and learn from it.
Mika Vikona. The Breakers face the Illawarra Hawks on the North Shore tomorrow night. The Auckland golfer Ryan Fox is tied for second, nearing the end of the opening round of the Australian PGA on the Gold Coast. He's 2 shots behind Australian Andrew Dodd. Fox was one of the early starters and fired a 5-under par 67.
It was a great day out there. We got the best of the conditions this morning, I think, and golf course is really good at the moment. It's playing a little softer than last year, and the greens are rolling a little better, and nice to take advantage of that.
Fellow New Zealander Danny Lee is 2 shots behind Fox in a tie for 10th. That's the news.
The extent of historic abuse of children in state care.
It wasn't just me. They got us to beat up other children. The staff beat us up. We got prostituted out. I still have nightmares. I still wake up screaming. I still wake up in sweat.
More families speak out.
For them being ill-treated like that, I've actually got no words for it. If I did, it was an ugly word.
What next?
It's really about the future. We don't have any accountability in the system, so how do you change a system for the future which is safe for children?
Matters of Trust, Morning Report, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, an independent inquiry at New Zealand Ballet as dancers complain of mistreatment by the outgoing artistic director. And after 10, an atlas of countries that don't exist, a tour of might-have-been countries and odd locations that exist outside of the established order. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather now through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel. Long fine spells, isolated showers mainly afternoon and evening. Waikato and Bay of Plenty, cloudy periods, a few afternoon and evening showers today. Waitomo to Kapiti Coast, also the central high country, fine. Areas of morning and evening cloud. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, scattered showers, turning to rain in Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa tomorrow morning, then clearing Wairarapa tomorrow night. Wellington, also Nelson and Buller, cloudy periods, a few showers tomorrow afternoon and evening. Westland and Fiordland, fine apart from morning and evening cloud. Marlborough and Canterbury, mostly cloudy with scattered showers turning to rain tonight, then clearing tomorrow afternoon. Otago and Southland, cloudy periods with long fine breaks in the afternoons, patchy drizzle possible tomorrow morning. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with a few showers. It's just gone 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. Busy evening. We are live in Napier coming up, where the Ravensdown fertiliser plant, as you just heard in the news, is on fire. A massive blaze. We will be there live with our reporter. And are police being diverted from frontline duties because the minister wants to look tough on burglary? We're looking at that soon. All that, and in breaking news, this just in from the Prime Minister's office regarding the sealing of the Pike River mine and the family's requests to meet the Prime Minister. Of course, we looked at this in length last night. The Prime Minister has responded. The Prime Minister's office has just this afternoon received a request for a meeting from the Pike River families. The Prime Minister will consider the request and will respond to the families directly rather than through the media. We're going back to Greymouth to get a response to that. All of that coming up. But we begin tonight in Kaikoura. Checkpoint can tonight reveal it may be months before the famous whale watch boats can operate again. With road access proving unreliable, tourists unable to get in and the key tourist attractions not operating, accommodation bookings are being cancelled, and a holiday town that should be reaching peak season right about now isn't doing much business at all. But the light at the end of the tunnel was the very welcome news last week that the whales have not been driven away by the earthquake and they are still there. If the whales are still there, the tourists will come when they can get in. But, and this is an expensive but, with the harbour floor having been lifted by the earthquake, the whale boats can't operate until it's dredged, and there's now real concern that that may take months rather than weeks. Here's Kawahi Napora, the CEO of Whale Watch Kaikoura.
So we've just had just finished having a discussion around the plans going forward. And so we're still yet to determine a start date. But what's becoming clear is the job, and as we study the job more, is how complex it is. And it's complex because they need to do the work in a way so it doesn't undermine some of the key infrastructure around there, namely the concrete sea wall and the breakwater that keeps the inner marina safe from the rough seas. And so what the current thinking is to do or to complete the full job from go to woe could be as long as 4 months.
And that's once it's started. So we're talking 4 months plus whatever period before it begins.
Yes. I mean, that's a very long period of time. So we're now in discussions with the guys that are working really, really hard around the clock to come up with these plans to try and figure out some type of methodology where we can get up to 2 of our berths operational first, and then they can complete the other 2 berths, because we have 4 berths in total, after that. So that will mean that at least we can get a couple of boats operating, in at least half the time it would take if we don't operate until the whole thing's done.
So if you manage to achieve that, Kauahi, and all goes as well as it possibly can, at the earliest, when do you think you would be able to take tourists out whale watching again?
Well, we're hoping within the next couple of months at the maximum.
But at the moment, you're not being told that. You're being told 4 months plus.
Yeah, 4 months for the whole job. Yeah, 4 months for the whole job, and that's due to the complexity of it all.
And who's making those assessments? So when you're having these meetings, who are you talking to?
Yep. So we're talking with, we have our harbour master here. So he's working hard of trying to get these plans together. We've also got the engineers that are putting the plans together as well. So we're talking with these guys, and I guess as we move through the process, it just shows you how complex. When we first started this thing, we thought we could just dredge it out, and then we could start operating. But then, obviously, the issues with existing infrastructure and making sure that we don't put ourselves in a worse position than we are now have actually, come to light. And so there are some challenges. So it's not as easy as we first thought. But obviously, John, we need to, for the community's sake and for our own sake, is we really need to have the ability to get out to see the whales. I mean, and even if that's 1 boat a day, that at least shows the world that we're back out there, and that's really important for us.
Kauahi, it's impossible really to overstate the importance of your operation to Kaikoura. I think overwhelmingly people who go to that town go there to see the whales, and we're already hearing stories of just cancellation after cancellation after cancellation, because not only is it really difficult to get to Kaikoura, there's nothing to do when you get there. So it is absolutely critical for you, obviously, as operators, and for the town itself, that this operation is up and running ASAP. But at the moment, you are missing the school holidays, even in the best possible scenario, aren't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's yes, there's some challenges there, John. But those guys that are trying to work these plans up, I mean, they're giving it 100%, and we're just trying to work with them to find how we can, get the job done well, get it done professionally, but getting it done as quick as we can. I mean, we just got to get it done.
In the meantime, there is an assistance package which is supporting businesses in the town. That's going to run out well and truly before you're going to be up and running again. Would you like to see that extended, or is it becoming bigger than that now? Is the problem becoming bigger and more costly?
Yeah, I think it's a bigger issue than that. I think there's lots of businesses, small and large, in Kaikoura that they're really going to have to look at that support package for them. But from our perspective, it's much bigger than that. It's really about getting that key infrastructure sorted in a timely manner. And I know things aren't easy, and there's going to be some challenges, but for us, that's where it all lies, is that ability to get back operating. And so it's not just ourselves with the marinas, there's a whole bunch of other marine-based operators that use it as well.
Yeah, we've spoken to some of them, so you can swim with the dolphins and you can go around the coastline and look at the seals and all of that stuff,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
But Kauahi, you are the biggest and the most lucrative, and on a good day, how many people a day, peak season, were you taking out?
768.
And they
Per
day, and they were spending how much per trip?
145.
And also they were having lunch in town, and some of them were staying the night in town and eating dinner and going to the bars. So they were keeping that community afloat.
Absolutely.
Kauahi Napora, who is the CEO of Whale Watch Kaikoura, will be back in the town later. It's 5:15. The Police Minister Judith Collins says she has seen no evidence officers have been diverted from organised crime to respond to burglaries. A frontline police officer wrote in the union's monthly newsletter claiming a squad had been shut down and that staff were being drawn away from general duties. The officer described diverting resources to attend burglaries as robbing Peter to pay Paul, and that police were at rock bottom and chasing their tails. Our political reporter May Heron talked to Judith Collins today.
Do you think it's acceptable that units are shut down to deal with burglaries though?
Well, I think burglaries are extremely important, and I think it's often, I always respect the views of frontline police officers, but it's really difficult if they write anonymous letters, and it's very difficult to actually take. I'd like to hope that police officers who were concerned about something like that would take the matter through to their own supervisors and then to the executive so that people actually know. So that's the trouble with anonymous letters.
But do you think it should be prioritised over organised crime, burglaries?
I think burglaries are really, really important.
More than organised crime though?
Well, I don't think it's one or the other. I think that
But in this case it is. This guy is saying in one case it is
well,
one or the
I'm
other.
sorry, I don't know who it is that's saying that or what the evidence is.
Judith Collins, not long ago, we're going to talk to Police Deputy Commissioner Viv Rickard after 5:30. That is when he is coming out of a meeting and is available, and we will put all of that to him then. A hazardous fire is burning at the Ravensdown fertiliser plant just south of Napier. The police have cordoned off roads in the area, including State Highway 2. The fire broke out in a 5-storey shed at about 2:15 this afternoon. Our reporter Edward Gay is at the cordon. Hi Edward, what can you tell us?
G'day, John. Yeah, that's right. I'm at the intersection of Awatoto Road and State Highway 2, where roading contractors are manning the detour here, all traffic being sent down Awatoto Road. I mean, I can't see any fire or smoke, actually, from where I am, but I have got a very clear view of the of the Ravensdown factory. We know that 50 staff have been evacuated, that according to the company there are no injuries, that there are essential staff still there, but according to the company, the CEO, Greg Campbell, he says that the fire department will give the site back to the company at about 8 p.m. tonight. Now, it's a 5-storey storage shed that I'm looking at, as well as the chimneys and what have you, and apparently up to 1,000 tonnes of sulphur is on site. It's a toxic chemical when it's burning. People have been evacuated from the area. Others, the DHB's put out a warning to shut all the windows, shut off your air conditioning, and that anyone experiencing breathing difficulties should see a medical expert straight away.
Our reporter Edward Gay, who was at the cordon. We have confirmation now from the Fire Assistant Area Commander there that the fire is now under control. It is now under control, but State Highway 2 is very much closed for the time being, heading south of Napier. The time is 5:90. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. Coming up on the programme, New Zealand students come bottom of the English-speaking world in an international maths test. Is streaming to blame? Should organ donation be opt-out rather than opt-in? And we talk to the man who donated an organ and helped change the law. And we do go down to Greymouth for a reaction to the fact that Prime Minister is now considering a request to meet with those Pike families. All of that is coming up. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. You can text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. You can email checkpoint at radionz.co.nz, and we are, of course, on Facebook, Checkpoint with John Campbell. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for your feedback, however it is coming in. A leaked recording shows the pilot of the plane which crashed in Colombia, killing almost all members of a Brazilian football team, along with officials and journalists, radioed that the aircraft was in total electrical failure and seemed to have run out of fuel. 71 people were killed when the plane carrying the Chapecoense football side slammed into a mountain on its approach to Medellin. 6 people survived, and they have been speaking to investigators as they've been able to. The BBC's Arlene Makbul reports.
A pilot in trouble. Lamia 933 is in total failure, he says. Total electrical failure. No fuel. And there follows a panicked back and forth over navigation. Vectors, the pilot shouts, pleading for directions. It's too late. The control tower desperately asks for the plane's location, but there's no response. The plane had crashed just 8 miles from the runway. All but 6 of the 77 people on board, including most of the Chapecoense football team, wiped out in an instant. They'd taken off from Santa Cruz in Bolivia. The airline director says the pilot had the option of refueling in Bogota, but he chose to carry on to Medellin. It's not clear when he realized he was not going to make it. All 71 bodies have now been recovered.
Because there was no fire involved, the bodies are in relatively good condition, so the identification should be fast. We should complete the process within 2 days.
Well, that fact that the plane didn't burst into flames when it hit the mountains led to rumours right from the beginning that it had run out of fuel. This new audio appears to confirm that and will only add to the anguish of those mourning back home. In southern Brazil, the very stadium where over recent seasons they've watched the stunning rise of their sporting idols has now become a place to grieve together. Even the families of those killed are here. Like Rosangelo Loureiro, widow of the Chapecoense player Kleber. I've been coming here since the accident because staying home is worse, she says. We didn't sleep last night. We just can't sleep. The 2 of us were together since I was 14 years old. During the day, some have been trying to find solace just by being in the place where the spirit of their heroes will now live on. Tonight, there's due to be a far larger gathering remembering the dead before their bodies start to arrive home in the coming days.
Yes, let's talk about that far larger gathering. The Chapecoense football side was supposed to play in Colombia today. Instead, thousands turned out at the ground where they were meant to play to pay their respects for the 71 who died in the plane crash. It's been described as very, very moving indeed. Santiago Viegas Ceballos was one of those inside the Nacional Atlética Stadium in Medellin. It normally seats about 45,000 people. But Santiago told our reporter Alex Ashton 100,000 people were waiting outside, all wanting to pay their respects to those who died.
And a lot of people carry flowers or balloons, white balloons. People were expressing some kind of sorrow. Almost some other people were crying. Even if you were with a completely strange at your side, you want to hug them, you want to hug him or her, because it was a really sense of kindness there in the stadium with a lot of respect.
You mentioned before they released pigeons, yeah?
Yes, in some part of the act, the people from the Atlético Nacional, the other football players, let fly around 71 different pigeons, white pigeons. So you can see the people paying attention to the flight of the pigeons and some people crying because it was a very, very emotional moment of the act.
Were people loud?
People cry a lot, you know. It's really difficult to describe that because you feel sorrow, but you feel kindness, so you're happy to be there. In some moments you have to smile, but people were happy to be there to demonstrate to Brazilians and to the other sport players that we were there for them.
Very moving scenes as 100,000 people turned out for a game that could not be played because, of course, of that plane crash. It's 25 minutes past 5. Let's return now to Judith Collins. This is a story about where the police resources are being shifted from organised crime to respond to burglaries. It's from Police News, the voice of the police, the voice of police, and there is a column in it by a person who goes by the name I Am Keen, and he describes resources being taken away from frontline policing to honour the minister's request that every burglary is investigated. This person, this anonymous author, describes it as robbing Peter to pay Paul. And the minister fairly angrily rejected this when our political reporter May Heron spoke to her about it this afternoon, and she said, where's the evidence? This is an anonymous complaint. Where is the evidence? Joining us on the phone now is Police Deputy Commissioner Viv Rickard. Deputy Commissioner Rickard, are you there?
Kia ora, John.
Kia ora, nice to talk to you as always. Does this person who is writing under the pseudonym I Am Keen have a point? Is Peter being robbed to pay Paul, and is Paul the minister?
Look, I think we need to be very clear that, we've got 12,000 police people. We're very passionate about organised crime, about dealing with drugs, about attending burglaries, about reducing victimisation and preventing crime. So, it's very easy for some people to write around things anonymously, but the reality is we will always prioritise what we have to do. And we made the decision, it was the police, New Zealand Police, not the minister, that made the decision to attend all burglaries because of the impact on victims.
Deputy Commissioner, you made the decision after the minister told you to, didn't you? I mean, look, you are stuck between a rock and a hard place. You've got a formidable, singular minister. You have public opinion. You've got opinionated members of your force. And I know this is a nightmarish balancing act for you, but the minister wanted you to do this. You did this, and you didn't get extra resources.
Well, the reality is we should be attending every burglary anyway.
That is the reality, but were you given extra resources to do so?
No, my job and our job is to make sure that the public can actually see the police, that the police respond to their requests. The reality is that we should be going there because, for most New Zealanders, they aren't affected by crime. But when you are affected and someone breaks into your house, we want to do something about it.
And I'm sure people who are listening who have been broken into are going, hear, hear.
Yeah.
But let's just take all of the spin out, and I'm not being disrespectful, and let's look at the dispassionate reality of the situation. You were asked to attend more burglaries than you were attending. You were asked to attend every burglary, and you weren't given more resources to do it with. Now, it doesn't seem a ridiculous or absurd leap of logic to suggest that you had to take those resources from somewhere else, exactly as this person is describing.
Oh, look, my world and our world in police is that every day we're making decisions around our deployment. That's what you'd expect us to do. We're always having to prioritise what we're going to do. We balance that up. Every organisation, every police organisation around the world, if you said to them, do you want more police officers, they would say yes. But I think first and foremost, our duty is to actually, I've got 12,000 people at the moment. What do we do with those 12,000 people?
Okay, so this person's right then. What you are saying is actually, just quietly, this person is right. You are reallocating your personnel to meet the target of attending all the burglaries.
No one has been reallocated from organised crime, so that's why I'm sort of smiling in the background to say...
Right, full stop. No one from organised crime, full stop. Not seconded, not moved, not taken off for a few days or a few weeks. No one has gone from organised crime to up your burglary visitation.
Look, we have 12,000 people, let me just get back to that. Full stop, that we have a focus on a whole range of things. Today, we might have a detective that's investigating drugs. Tomorrow, that same detective might be investigating an aggravated robbery. The day after may be involved in a homicide. Now, we deploy our resources according to risk. It would be daft to do otherwise. It would be daft.
Okay. Do you have because this person suggests the only solution is more staff. With successive frozen budgets, we are at rock bottom. Now, I don't expect you to comment on that, but do you want more staff?
Oh, as I've said, you won't find any police service around the world that would say no to some more people. Our people always want to do more. They always want to do better. They always want to give a better service. But I find it really interesting that we're not doing, allegedly taking staff away from organised crime. This year, we've had the highest number of bulk methamphetamine seizures than we've had ever. We've seized hundreds of millions of dollars worth of methamphetamine around the country. We're focusing on organised crime.
Okay.
And we're doing the things that you'd expect us to do.
Okay, one final question. Given the precarious and nightmarish balancing act that you find yourself presented with, rather you with me, and I think you're doing a magnificent job. And if the minister's listening, she'll be thinking, yep, he's my man. But are you sending people to the things you want to send them to, full stop?
We are.
Police Deputy Commissioner Viv Rickard, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Representatives of Pike's families met with Solid Energy CEO yesterday and were told it would proceed with plans to seal the Pike River mine. A short time ago, the Prime Minister's office told us it had received a request for a meeting from the Pike River families. This, in fact, took place at a little blockade that the Pike River families are doing at the entrance to Pike River. They were doing it this morning. They passed it on. The Prime Minister's office has responded. The Prime Minister will consider the request and will respond to the families directly rather than through the media. The family spokesperson who joined us last night was at the blockade this morning is Bernie Monk, whose son Michael Monk died in the mine. And for 6 years, Bernie, you have been speaking on behalf of the families, desperate for some resolution. Is this the beginning of it, do you think? Do you think the Prime Minister is going to meet with you?
Well, we've got no other means now, and I think in fairness, he needs to meet with us, and that was the reason why I wrote to him today. And I hope he takes up the request because, there's no use. They say, he says, and go round and round in circles. All we've asked for is a commitment to sit down with our experts and whoever they want to bring along and get this out once and for all. And I've always said this, that if our experts say to me, Bernie, this can't be done, I'll be the first person to go up there and put the first spade of concrete or whatever needs to go into that mine. And I've always said that. But I am not convinced. And when I get my experts overseas saying the same thing as I feel, my gut feeling says, I'm going to continue. And along with the members that want to help me do this, I will stand beside them.
Bernie, you've met with the Prime Minister before. He came and met with you, and someone recorded that meeting on a cell phone, and I suspect many people have seen that footage, and he absolutely reassured you then, some years ago now, that he was committed to getting your boys out.
Yeah,
and you absolutely, because I spoke to you afterwards, took him at his word, didn't you?
I did, and in fact, even though, people, or he might say that it was done at the heat of the moment and he was overwhelmed, but the other thing is he's got to listen to the men. He's got to have confidence, would be the best way, and having people do the job. And Solid Energy, I'm afraid, are not the firm that had any intentions of actually doing the job.
Bernie, you're protesting there at the moment. You were there this morning. I know you're planning to go back tomorrow morning. Will you desist just for the time being while you wait to hear from the Prime Minister's office, or are you going to keep up those fairly gentle blockades at the entrance to the mine there?
Oh, well, this is our last fight, and no, we'll be keeping this blockade up to something happens. We mean to make a point now. We've sat back and we've honestly, I thought in my gut that Solid Energy was the people to do the job, and they're obviously not. And the people that I've used I've got no confidence in them, so I'll be keeping the blockade up.
That's family spokesperson Bernie Monk, whose son Michael was in the mine, of course, speaking to us live from Greymouth. That news just breaking as we were going to air. It is 26 and a half to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. Coming up, we're going to look at the issue of organ donation. A man who donated a kidney to his grandmother and in doing so changed the law. Unanimous agreement in Parliament that people who donate organs should be compensated for income loss while they recover. We'll talk about that after business news with Nona, who is standing by. But first, the RNZ headlines with Katrina.
Fire crews from across Hawke's Bay are at a toxic fire at the Ravensdown fertiliser plant just south of Napier. The fire broke out in a shed storing up to 1,000 tonnes of sulphur shortly after 2 o'clock. There have been extensive evacuations downwind of the factory, and the District Health Board is urging other people nearby to close windows and doors to avoid inhaling smoke or burning sulphur. paramedics who treated 2 firefighters for minor injuries from the fire. Roads in the area are cordoned off, including State Highway 2. The Police Minister has seen no evidence of officers being diverted from organised crime to respond to burglaries. A frontline police officer claimed in a union newsletter that a squad has been shut down and staff are being drawn away from general duties. Judith Collins says the only report she'd seen about an organised crime squad being closed was in the officer's anonymous column. The Human Rights Commission is supporting demands for an independent inquiry into the abuse of children while in state care. The Disability Rights Commissioner says the Commission agrees with Judge Carolyn Henwood that the inquiry is needed to ensure the abuse of children in state care never happens again. Pilots have welcomed the imprisonment of a Christchurch man who endangered passenger aircraft with a high-powered laser pointer. Taine Hemapo was sentenced today to 10 weeks in prison. The 39-year-old had admitted to charges of causing unnecessary danger to people on board an aircraft. The Kaikoura quake has thrown some real estate deals around the country into disarray. Kaikoura woman Lynn Hasty has pulled her rental off the market because her family needs to live in it after their home was damaged. Real estate agent Joe Van Royen has cemented 3 deals since November the 14th, but 7 others now need more work, such as geotechnical checks. In Oararo, 2 would-be sellers say uncertainty about road access is a deterrent to selling. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now with Nona Peltier. Hi, Nona.
Hello.
Latest QV house figures are out. Queenstown has now joined Auckland in having an average price for residential property of $1 million plus, right?
That's right. That's correct. Yeah.
And Queenstown has just shot up in the last year, hasn't it?
And it's true that the prices have been rising everywhere, but now a little bit slower because of these new lending restrictions that have been brought in recently by the Reserve Bank. But they're still very high. I mean, when you're talking about slowing increases, we're talking about the average quotable value house price index increased 12.4% in the year ended November. Now, that's a slowing rate. It slowed from 12.7% the month before.
Is that nationwide?
Yeah, that's the nationwide price, yeah.
12.4%.
Yes, that's right. But not in Queenstown. No.
What was it in Queenstown?
Well, the QV national spokesperson, Andrea Rush, I spoke with her today a couple of times. She says the tighter lending measures imposed by the banks have been, having an impact on the growth of house prices, but not in Queenstown, where prices rose a massive 32% over the past year.
That's just nuts, 1/3.
Now, we have a little bit of audio from Andrea earlier today.
One very strong performer in the latest monthly QV House Price Index figures is the Queenstown market, and the Queenstown district now followed the Auckland region to post an average value over $1 million after recording a massive 32.2% rise in residential property values over the past year.
Yeah, it's just extraordinary, isn't it?
So that's our national spokesperson for QV, Andrea Rush. And I spoke with her again this afternoon about just what the potential impact could be on further restrictions. Well, it was really interesting that she said that investors, smaller investors, larger investors, you name it, are buying properties outside of the main centres in those regions where the house prices are like $300,000, etc. Because it's a lot easier to get a mortgage if you've got to put 40% down on a house that's selling for $300,000 than one that's selling for $1 million.
Queenstown's fascinating. We've looked at it at length on this program because it's a service town, it's a tourist town. So there are an awful lot of people working in bars, cleaning hotels, waiting in restaurants or whatever, earning $16, $17, $18 an hour or whatever. They can't afford to live in the town where they are employed. So this is an extraordinary situation. And there's such a chronic shortage of property there.
And I think a lot of places are finding that, certainly in Auckland, and I mean, it's not surprising that sought-after locations like Queenstown are going to see the same kind of issue.
Some action on the oil markets today.
Yeah, well, exactly. We've been sitting around here for, a year? Maybe longer, talking about oil production versus the supply, the big oil glut. Well, would you believe it? The Saudis have finally come to the party and decided to, and agreed to, with a lot of other OPEC nations, to limit production.
Right, so prices...
Yeah, they sure did. So let's say 1 million barrels a day less. Okay, I mean, they're still producing a lot, but 1 million less. What does that equate to? That equated to a 9% rise in oil prices. That's the U.S. price, to over just shy of $50 a barrel. The Brent crude, which is the one we usually talk about, it moved to a 6-week peak of 52.37. So, finally some deal on oil. That certainly buoyed the market, energy stocks, and you name it. So, yeah, very big news on the market. And, so we finished up 0.5% today. That's our NZX Top 50 Index, up 36 points to 6,933. And the New Zealand dollar trading at 70.8 US cents, 95.6 Australian. And that British pence, 56.5.
Nona Peltier, thanks so much. Nona doing the numbers, and let's stick with them. New Zealand students have come bottom of the English-speaking world in an international maths test, and academics are blaming streaming. They say putting children together based on academic ability leads to worse results and less direct teaching. And they say it's widespread in schools despite repeated warnings that it doesn't work. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen filed this report.
9 times 1. Yeah. Equals 1 group of 9. So it's 9. Okay.
New Zealand's scores in the trends in maths and science study have barely changed over the past decade. But other countries have improved, and the gap between our best and worst performing students has got bigger. Glenda Anthony from Massey University says ability grouping or streaming children for maths lessons is a big part of the problem.
What that's tended to do is to have your low achievers in a group that are often getting less than desirable opportunities to learn, and that they're getting a lot of basic facts practice and memorisation and not developing those problem-solving skills that we want.
Glenda Anthony says ability groups also reduce the amount of teaching that goes on.
Our experience of being in classrooms is that often those groups that are working fairly independently, they're working as individuals, not as a group for a start, they're a lot of the time not achieving a lot of learning.
David Mitchell is an adjunct professor at Canterbury University and the author of a book on evidence-based teaching. He says streaming's bad, especially for children from poor families.
Children in low groups, low streams, they are not given opportunities to learn equivalent to those in higher streams. It means that the children are exposed to a lower order of the curriculum. They have low expectations placed upon them.
At Kaikoura School in Porirua, the principal, Michelle Whiting, says children do maths in groups, but they're not organised by ability, and that's good for everyone.
It gives an opportunity for students who might not have the confidence to share their ideas to be included in a group where it's actually expected of them to do it. So the two things go hand in hand.
Michelle Whiting says the school is part of a Massey University project that encourages active inquiry into how maths works.
We're in our second year of that project, and we are seeing accelerated learning in particular cohorts at this stage. We've seen a huge increase in students enjoying maths and wanting to do maths. And one of the best things for me is students being able to articulate their thinking and also to question other students.
The principal of Wakefield School near Nelson, Peter Verstappen, says when things get busy, schools are sometimes guilty of prioritising reading and writing ahead of maths.
At the junior end of the school, the priority tends to be literacy first, then mathematics. And so when school gets busy, of those core subjects, reading, writing, mathematics, I think what does tend to happen is that if we have to drop something, it's often the mathematics.
Peter Verstappen says his school abandoned streaming 2 years ago, but teachers need to learn new strategies for teaching without it. For Checkpoint, called John Gerritsen Tēnei.
Come up to 60 minutes to 6. We've done something that's changed New Zealand. That's the reaction of a 29-year-old man to news that organ donors will be able to receive financial assistance following the passing of legislation in Parliament last night. The Members' Bill, in the name of National MP Chris Bishop, provides 100% of the donor's earnings for up to 12 weeks after the operation, plus childcare assistance for those who need it while they recover. Chris Bishop took up the cause after being approached by Matt van der Gulik's grandmother. Matt had donated a kidney to her, and she didn't feel it was right. Donors were out of pocket for doing so. So you donate a kidney or a liver, or part of your liver obviously, and you are in hospital for a long time recovering, during which time you are not earning income. So it all began with Matt van der Gulik and his grandmother Sharon, donor and recipient, and Matt, the donor, is chuffed the law has now been changed.
the financial burden is no longer an issue, and hopefully more people will see and be able to do it to help their loved ones and even strangers.
What made you do it? I mean, obviously it was your gran, but you know, lots of people have sick grandmothers and don't do things like this. What was it that made you think, yep, I'm going to be a donor?
I think it would be the relationship I have with my grandparents. Been very close all my life. So when tested, me and my two aunties were all compatible. But I was pretty dead set against doing it myself. For the fact is they've helped me. They've developed who I am now as a person. So I couldn't think of any better way to say thanks for all the help you've given me, to go back and do it and give her something what nobody else could do.
What a lovely grandson. But having done it, which was a fantastic thing to do, then there is a kind of financial penalty, isn't there, afterwards?
Yes, so I was lucky I had great employers as well. And my grandparents were able to subsidise me and assist me with my loss of income. But receiving only just over $200 a week from work and income, I was a new homeowner. I have had my own life, had insurances, all the normal expenses everyone else does. But $200 a week just did not cut it. So I was lucky that I had that assistance. But there's a lot of people out there who just don't have that ability or are not in the financial position to be able to help someone to do it.
Yeah, and there's not enough incentives, it seems, at the moment for us to be donors, right? I mean, if you add a financial disincentive into the mix, then we really are going to struggle to get people to donate. So your grandma, I think, you know, I don't want to get carried away here, but I think just quietly she might have accosted Chris Bishop, the MP, right, at a function of some description and said, "Oi, listen to me," and he did.
Yes, so that was at the Balcott golf course, and my grandfather dragged my nana up the stairs. She could barely walk at the time, and Chris was not even an MP yet, and he promised my nana if I get elected and I become an MP, I will take on this bill and I'll get it through Parliament. And so Chris Bishop has been true to his word and followed through on this because he felt it was grossly unfair as well.
How's your grandma?
She's doing really well. Unfortunately, the kidney did reject. So we went through the sort of devastating loss that it did not work for her. But we've come out of this whilst she's back on dialysis. Regardless of that, we've done something that's changed New Zealand and now made it an equal playing field so anyone can donate.
Matt van der Gulik. So Matt's grandparents went to Chris Bishop went to Parliament, and Parliament, well, last night it agreed.
It passed unanimously, so we went through unanimously through all the stages, actually. I think everyone could see the logic and the merit in it, and we tidied it up at Select Committee, improved it, actually, and it passed its third reading yesterday.
So what does it give people who are donors?
So what it does is it creates an entitlement for live organ donors for them to be compensated at 100% of what they are earning before the surgery during their recuperation. So, you know, a big barrier for live organ donors is obviously the time they have to take off work. So typically the recovery period is between 4 and 12 weeks at the upper end. And that's obviously, and you can't work in that time. You're essentially recovering and recuperating. And so for a lot of people, they have to make an enormous financial sacrifice. And at the moment, you get the equivalent of the sickness benefit. And that's obviously manifestly unfair for people, and so what the bill will do will mean that you get what you're earning before the operation, basically. So you're not better off from having the surgery, from doing the altruistic donation, but you're not worse off as well. And that's the principle of cost neutrality, and that's what the United Kingdom's done. That's what some other countries are doing as well, and it's now what will be the law in New Zealand.
And given our woefully low rate of live donors, it's actually not going to cost the government terribly much, is it?
Well, I reckon, and actually the modelling backs this up as well. So there's been some quite interesting research out of the University of Canterbury by Dr. Elizabeth Prasad, who did a master's thesis on this, that it will actually save the government money because dialysis is extraordinarily expensive, obviously, for the health system to provide. So the more people we can get having those donations, having live organ donations, the more people we can get off dialysis and back leading healthy and productive lives, paying tax, obviously, and of course not incurring that expense. that's not the major driver of it. I've got to say, it's not the major driver of the bill, but it's obviously an extremely nice byproduct of it.
We do have, and there's no nice way of putting this, an abysmally, shamefully low rate of organ donation, both live donation and after death. Is it time to look at other things to encourage people to do donors, to become donors? For example, do we need to have a situation where we are all donors and we have to opt out rather than opt in?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at that. I mean, the Minister of Health, Jonathan Coleman's, in parallel with my bill going through, has been doing a review of our deceased donation regime, which is essentially when you die and you have the opportunity potentially to give up a part of your organs. And he's put a consultation document out there. He's doing a review, and the officials have gone away and looked at that, and there'll be some announcements and decisions made on that in due course. But the evidence is that actually that the best way of raising the rate of deceased donations is the behaviour and the culture in the ICU by doctors in hospitals. It's about asking family members would they be comfortable with their loved one who is about to pass on. Would they be comfortable, do you think, with them donating, and explaining to them about the benefits, the enormous benefits that you can give to somebody else who's obviously still alive.
Are you a donor? Have you got that down on your driver's licence?
Yep, I've got it on my driver's licence, and most importantly, I've told my loved ones that I'd like to be a donor, because what's on your driver's licence, and a lot of people don't know this, but what's on your driver's licence is not legally binding. So it's really important you tell your family members, because they're the people that the doctors go to. If you're ever in that unfortunate circumstance of a horrific car crash, the doctors are going to go ask your family and say, do you think Chris or John or anyone, do you think they would be comfortable with donating a kidney or liver to help somebody out?
Chris Bishop, the MP whose members' bill on getting compensation for people as they recover after being donors was unanimously passed by the House last night. Unanimity in Parliament, not that common. We turn now to the tragic case of a woman who stabbed her friend to death, believing a guardian angel had instructed her to do so. This took place in the Wellington suburb of Strathmore in May. It had its judicial ending in the High Court in Wellington today, with the woman who can't be named being found not guilty of murder by reason of insanity. The victim was Heidi Pryor, 37 years old and an expat Australian who'd lived in Wellington for 10 years. A lover of mountain biking, she'd taken to Wellington's hills with great enthusiasm. Our court reporter Anne-Marie May on what the court heard about the terrible circumstances in which she died.
Well, Justice Simon France said that when this woman stabbed Heidi Pryor, she believed she was acting under the instruction of a guardian angel who had told her that Ms Pryor was a martyr of some kind whose death would save the world. The court heard the women had become friends because their partners were friends, and on the night that she died, Heidi Pryor was supposed to go and collect her husband from the airport, but this woman said, come round and have a meal before you go. Now, when she got there, she noticed the woman behaving strangely. This included things like putting a beanbag next to a chair, standing on the chair and falling off onto the beanbag. And Ms Pryor said, there's clearly something not right here. I'm going to call your parents and get some help. When she said that, apparently that kind of distressed this woman. She took a knife and stabbed Ms Pryor several times, including two blows to the chest, and that was what led to her almost immediate death. Justice Simon France said that cut through some very essential arteries and veins. The woman had suffered an earlier psychotic episode last year and had been on medication for that, but since early this year her health had declined again and she had become fixated on an imaginary friend. She thought that person was corresponding with her through song lyrics on social media, and the judge said the delusions were getting worse, but until Heidi Pryor's death no one had realised that was what was going on.
Anne-Marie, can I just clarify something here? Those of us who grew up watching people being found not guilty by reason of insanity, obviously it went to trial and the jury made that determination, but that's changed, hasn't it? Both generally and specifically. That's not the case here, and it's not the case here because the Crown was prepared to accept a verdict of insanity, is that right?
That's right, because until a few years ago, you're right, a jury did have to decide this, but now the law has changed so that if the Crown and the defence agree that there is this diminished responsibility, if you like, then there's no need for a jury to be involved. A judge can hear evidence and can then make a decision on that. So today we heard from two experienced psychiatrists. One of them was Professor Philip Brinded, who was essentially giving evidence for the Crown, and the other was Dr. Justin Barry Walsh, who was called by the defence. Professor Brinded said that while the woman had done very well mentally since the killing, there was no doubt that she was severely mentally ill at the time and had no insight that her health had deteriorated so rapidly. He said she'd come off her medication and the result was a catastrophe, and he said she had to be made a special patient so that extra safety measures could be put in place for her. Dr. Justin Barry Walsh also agreed with that. He said that was in her interest and the public's. He said if she was just held in a facility as a mentally unwell person, she wouldn't be subject to such a restrictive regime. She might fall out of the system, and that could have terrible potential results.
Right, so what does happen to her now, given those kinds of conversations?
Well, based on those assessments, Justice France made the order that the woman be retained as a special patient in a mental health facility. He said that includes giving those responsible for her care and her potential release greater powers when she comes out. They can put oversight and special conditions on her that wouldn't be the case otherwise. He lifted name suppression for her, but he's given her until December the 16th to apply to the Court of Appeal to have that overturned and name suppression continued. This, of course, has been tragic all round. Both families, Heidi Pryor's and the woman's, were in court. Heidi Pryor, of course, had been married just months before she died. And at the end of today's hearing, Justice France expressed his deep sympathy to all those involved.
Anne-Marie May, our Wellington court reporter from the Wellington newsroom. Donald Trump has announced he will stop running his global business empire to avoid conflicts of interest when he becomes president. In what's becoming his signature style, the US president-elect made the announcement on Twitter, saying he would separate himself in total from his worldwide business holdings in order to focus on running the country. From Washington, here's the BBC's Sarah Smith.
Donald Trump owns hotels, blocks of flats and golf courses from Miami to Manila and Mumbai, and they pose a huge potential conflict of interest for someone who's also in charge of US foreign policy. There is no law which says he has to hand over his business interests, but he's been under huge pressure to do so. Announcing on Twitter, he will hold a news conference in 2 weeks' time to discuss the fact that he will be leaving his company to concentrate on running the country. We have no detail yet on how he intends to separate himself from his business. Other presidents have put all their assets into a blind trust, but they didn't own tower blocks branded with their own name on the side. If Donald Trump intends to hand the business over to his children, that will not satisfy critics who say he will still have a strong familial interest in seeing the business succeed. And even if the family don't seek any special favours, foreign officials may feel there is an advantage to be gained by assisting the Trump organisation. Today we learned a little more about the direction Mr Trump's economic policy might take, with the appointment of billionaire Wilbur Ross as Commerce Secretary and millionaire Stephen Mnuchin as Treasury Secretary. He says they will aim for sustained economic growth of 3 to 4% to enable major tax cuts.
Our number one priority is tax reform. This will be the largest tax change since Reagan. We're going to cut corporate taxes, which will bring huge amounts of jobs back, will create huge economic growth, and we'll have huge personal income. So the revenues will be offset on the other side. And we're going to have a big middle-income tax cut.
Stephen Mnuchin is a hedge fund manager who financed Hollywood films like X-Men and Avatar. He was also a partner at Goldman Sachs, a firm Donald Trump characterised on the campaign trail as the embodiment of the global elite. Mnuchin once owned a bank, which was described as harsh and repugnant for unfairly foreclosing on some borrowers. And he was once sued by one Donald Trump over a business deal in Chicago.
The report from the BBC. Lots of feedback coming in on two things, Pike River and streaming. and the teaching of maths, which New Zealand appears not to be doing terribly well at, not the teaching but the learning. This from Rosie: it's more than streaming that's affecting maths outcomes in New Zealand, it's the convoluted way it's taught. Just pop into NumberWorks or Kip McGrath tutoring session and you will see dozens of middle-class intelligent kids grappling with the messy way maths is taught at some schools. Carol says, I dispute your expert's opinion on streaming. I took part in a similar test in 1970. We were streamed and our class performed well. And on Pike River, I hope John Key comes good on his promise to Pike River families. He may worry about what may be found in there, but he will lose all respect if he lets them down now. My heart goes out to the families. Kia kaha. Thank you for your feedback. Coming up after this news at 6, it's been revealed tonight on Checkpoint, in fact, that it will take up to 4 months for the Kaikoura harbour to be dredged, which means that whale watching may be that long away, and that is what the tourists come for. We have a look at the impact of the quakes on real estate in Kaikoura, and genius scientists pore over what's going on. All of that after Katrina with the news.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The police are evacuating people who live near the Ravensdown fertiliser plant south of Napier, where a toxic fire continues to burn. The fire broke out in a storage shed containing as much as 1,000 tonnes of sulphur and has also forced the evacuation of about 50 staff. Edward Gay is at the cordon on State Highway 2.
The fire service says there are still pockets of fire in the sulphur shed, and crews are having difficulty protecting a nearby building containing a further 200 tonnes of sulphur. The shift manager, Mike Wanoa, says 2 firefighters are being treated for minor injuries. Mr Wanoa says there are at least 50 firefighters at the scene wearing breathing apparatus. People downwind of the fire have been warned to keep windows closed and to turn off air conditioning units. The police have cordoned off roads surrounding the factory, including State Highway 1. In Napier, Edward Gay.
The Hawke's Bay District Health Board is urging people living near the plant at Awatoto to get medical help if they experience breathing difficulties. The Medical Officer of Health, Dr Nick Jones, says smoke from the fire and the burning sulphur could trigger breathing problems such as asthma or bronchitis.
The risk really is from both the smoke itself, but also with the sulphur burning that can produce gases such as sulphur dioxide, which can really irritate people's breathing, and particularly if they've got asthma or some other kind of respiratory condition.
The Hawke's Bay Medical Officer of Health, Nick Jones. One local man who's been evacuated is angry about the lack of information from officials. He says people have had to leave animals behind in their houses and don't know when they'll be allowed back in. The Deputy Police Commissioner, Viv Rickard, says no officers have been reallocated from organised crime to respond to burglaries. A frontline police officer claimed in the union's monthly newsletter that a squad had been shut down and staff were being drawn away from general duties. The officer described diverting resources to attend burglaries as robbing Peter to pay Paul and said police were at rock bottom and chasing their tails. But Mr Rickard told Checkpoint police always prioritise what they do and decisions are being made daily about where resources are deployed.
Every organisation, every police organisation around the world, if you said to them, do you want more police officers, they would say yes. But I think first and foremost, our duty is to actually, I've got 12,000 people at the moment. What do we do with those 12,000 people?
The Deputy Police Commissioner, Viv Rickard. Academics say schools should stop grouping students according to their ability following New Zealand's poor performance in an international maths test. The Trends in Maths and Science study found New Zealand Year 5 and Year 9 students had the lowest average maths scores in the English-speaking world. Researchers say grouping or streaming children by ability for maths lessons is harming many children's performance. They say it reduces the amount of teaching children experience and creates lower expectations for poorly performing students. The Prime Minister is considering a direct request from the Pike River families to meet with them. The families held a meeting with Solid Energy's chief executive yesterday where they were told again that the company will proceed with plans to seal the mine. A group has been picketing outside the mine's gates today and demanding the men's remains are retrieved. Their spokesperson, Bernie Monk, told Checkpoint the blockade will continue until there is a meeting with John Key.
We mean to make a point now. We've sat back and we've honestly, I thought in my gut that Solid Energy was the people to do the job, and they're obviously not. And the people that I used, I've got no confidence in them, so I'll be keeping the blockade up.
A Pike River family spokesperson, Bernie Monk. The Kaikoura quake has thrown many real estate deals around the region into turmoil, while homeowners may be facing being unable to sell or taking a big price cut. Some buyers are sniffing out unexpected opportunities. Phil Pennington reports.
Kaikoura woman Lynn Hasty has pulled her rental off the market because her family needs to live in it after their home was damaged. Real estate agent Joe Van Rooyen has cemented 3 deals since November the 14th, but 7 others now need more work, such as geotechnical checks. But he's had Australian buyers wanting to go ahead on a cafe deal, and another big commercial deal is still under consideration. He says the most uncertainty is in the hardest hit low-lying areas north of town, and thoughts are already turning to restricting new building to the rockier ground above the hospital. To the south, 2 would-be sellers say uncertainty about road access is a deterrent to selling, and one thinks it could take years to attract buyers back. This is Phil Pennington.
As well as triggering tens of thousands of landslides on land, the magnitude 7.8 Kaikoura earthquake also caused a massive underwater landslide. It moved down the deep canyon system that lies just offshore, generating a current of mud, sand and water that was detected more than 300 kilometres away off the coast of Hawke's Bay. Aniwa marine geologist Phil Barnes says that while they have plenty of evidence of past turbidities, this was a rare chance to see fresh evidence. The creator of the most popular hamburger in the world has died at the age of 98. Jim Delagatti invented the Big Mac almost 50 years ago when he was running McDonald's restaurants in the American state of Pennsylvania. The burger spread quickly throughout the chain after McDonald's introduced it nationally in 1968. It's 6:05. In sport, the New Zealand Breakers say they'll wait the outcome of Corey Webster's court case before deciding on his future with the basketball club. Today, the club suspended Webster for 1 game following his arrest yesterday for an incident at an Auckland bar. The Breakers said he was on his last chance after he failed a doping test in 2011. Breakers coach Paul Henare says regardless of the court case, Webster's actions were unacceptable.
I think he's let the team down for what our standards are and expectations are. That's the thing that hurts, and that's the thing that Corey's aware of, and the implications that come with that. So, disappointed, let down and all that, but for us, we address it, have addressed it, and we move forward.
Breakers coach Paul Henare. Manchester United have beaten West Ham 4-1 and Southampton beat Arsenal 2-0 to reach the semi-finals of English football's League Club. United manager Jose Mourinho, who had to watch his side from the stands after being banned from the touchline, was very encouraged by his side, which sits 6th in the Premiership.
We are not just playing well, but beautifully, and we are controlling opponents, and the results in the Premier League are not the results we want. Too much draws for so much football.
In the semi-finals, United play Hull and Southampton play Liverpool. And the Auckland golfer Ryan Fox is in a tie for second, 2 shots from the leader, nearing the end of the first round of the Australian PGA on the Gold Coast. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Dr. Apo Aparosa talks about the rise of kava clubs in Aotearoa. Our Changing World investigates the massive underwater avalanche triggered by the Kaikoura earthquake, while this week's cultural ambassador Andrew Todd takes us through a few narrative exploration video games. Games which are more about players' curiosity than his or her ability to destroy a maximum number of enemy targets. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland, Auckland and Coromandel. Long fine spells, isolated showers, mainly afternoon and evening. Waikato and Bay of Plenty, cloudy periods, a few afternoon and evening showers today. Waitomo to Kapiti Coast, also the central high country, fine, areas of morning and evening cloud. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, scattered showers, turning to rain in Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa tomorrow morning, then clearing Wairarapa tomorrow night. Wellington, also Nelson and Bulla, cloudy periods, a few showers tomorrow afternoon and evening. Westland and Fiordland, fine apart from morning and evening cloud. Marlborough and Canterbury, mostly cloudy with scattered showers turning to rain tonight, then clearing tomorrow afternoon. Otago and Southland, cloudy periods with long fine breaks in the afternoons. Patchy drizzle tomorrow, possibly tomorrow morning. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you so much, Katrina. Despite government legislation fast-tracking quake repair work in Kaikoura, it will be months before what is now a cul-de-sac town can cash in on tourism. Earlier on Checkpoint, Kauahi Napora, the CEO of Whale Watch Kaikoura, said the dredging of the harbour was expected to start in the middle of this month, but could take up to 4 months. No whale watching before that's done. So that's pretty much confirmed this summer season will be a write-off in terms of the main tourist attractions. Destination Kaikoura's General Manager is Glenn Ormsby. Glenn, you are there on the phone now?
Yes, kia ora, John.
Oh, kia ora. It's such a beautiful place and there is so much to come there for. But you can't get to it at the moment, can you? You can't get to the dolphins, you can't get to the seals, you can't get to the whales, and you need this to happen, don't you?
We do, John. You can get to the seals. The peninsula is still okay. There's not a blade of grass out of place on the peninsula walk. Looks fantastic. But certainly for Kauahi and Whale Watch, they do have challenges ahead of them at this stage.
Yeah. And what do you reckon, what percentage of the tourists who come to your town, you know, for longer than popping in for a pie for half an hour would go on that whale watching trip?
Oh, look, a very high percentage, John. And you've got to remember that 80% of the visitors that come to Kaikoura are international.
Yeah. And the wonderful thing about Kaikoura is that you can put your car on the ferry, you can cross at Picton, you can drive south heading to Queenstown or wherever you're going, Fiordland or some other magic part of the South Island, and you can stop in Kaikoura on the way, and it's such a magic little detour, isn't it?
It is, John, and once people realise what we've got here, they're not in a hurry to leave.
No, and perversely, this has been a wonderful advertisement of what you've forgot. I mean, there's not a person, what you've got. There's not a person in New Zealand who doesn't know it now, if they didn't know it already. But you need the road. You don't want to be a cul-de-sac, so you need State Highway 1 being open all the way through, and you need your attractions. Are you worried about what's going to happen in the meantime?
No, not really, John. We were a little bit worried at the start, but now we know that the whales are back. And they may never have gone. There are whales here. The dolphins are here in massive numbers again. The seals are here. But, John, we're talking about tourism, but you also got to remember about Kaikoura is how it's affected the fishing industry here. They're an integral part of our industry in Kaikoura. Yes.
Yeah, big employers too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So we are now potentially looking at 4 months until that marina's working again, right?
Yeah, I hadn't heard that. Interesting to hear that. Because, I mean, it is such a key part. But you've got to remember, we do have other activities. There's seal swim, there's Kaikoura kayaks, there's still a number of other options people can take.
Yeah, and there speaks a man with his heart in the right place. But the fact of the matter is things will be better, won't they, when that whale watching and the swimming with the dolphins and all that stuff is happening again?
Oh, look, it will be. And I think once the job's been finished on the marina, I think it'll be hopefully a lot better for what we had in the past too, to be honest.
Yeah, Glenn, what sort of cancellations are you seeing? Are you seeing, well, inevitably you are, and we've heard reports of it, but have you been able to quantify what sort of a percentage of people who were expected to come over the Christmas holiday break aren't coming now?
Oh, look, John, we don't have an actual figure. I think it's devastated the town over the summer season. Running the eyesight and so forth. Now we're looking at 2018 already. Hopefully not everyone's going to cancel. I think there still will be bookings, but, you know, we were expecting a very, very good summer this year.
And it's not going to be one now, is it?
Not at all.
Wow, it's a bummer, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. We've been doing some hard work and our numbers and figures are looking very, very good. But it's the town and the people. But there's one thing it has done. I think it's brought everyone in the town a lot closer together. And everyone's sort of looking after everyone else at the moment.
Yeah, that's special. Destination Kaikoura's General Manager Glenn Ormsby. Thank you so much, Glenn. Just confirming that news that Checkpoint revealed tonight. It could be up to 4 months, possibly even more, before the whale watch operation is able to run as it was running previously. Spare a thought too for the people trying to sell their homes or businesses in Kaikoura right now. Some homeowners face being unable to sell at all, or the prospect of taking a huge price cut. But for some buyers, I guess, it's posting an unexpected opportunity. Phil Pennington reports.
The for sale sign outside Lynn Hastie's rental property on a fractured lifestyle block north of town is about to be taken down. The quake has driven them out of their 1992 house and into their 1930s stucco rental.
We had our front property here on the market, and we live in our back property, which was severely damaged by the earthquake. So we've had to move out of our back property back into our front one. So therefore we'll now have to take it off the market until we get our back property assessed as to whether it's got to come down or not, and then reassess what we're going to do with our front house here that's we're trying to sell.
For Colin Hensley to the south in Oraro, it's the opposite problem. The quake's driven him to stay in his home. He listed the 2-bedroom wooden house as a private sale 10 days before the quake, and it's undamaged.
We had one guy very, very keen. He was going to come up on the Thursday, and we had the bloody earthquake on the Monday. He rang up one part of there and said, "Are you all right?" We said, "Yes." And he said, "Is there anything you need? I'm going to Christchurch." And we just said, "No, we've been looked after pretty well." But there was no mention of the house or looking at the house.
So the quake has paid to that potential sale?
Yep. I reckon it'll be another 5 years at least before we get anybody seriously about looking.
Mr Hensley, a 69-year-old one-time strip club owner in Nelson, says the biggest shame of what looks like a long delay to the sale is that his partner Wendy Brewerton desperately wants to go to Richmond, where they plan to buy a big caravan and look after her 4 grandchildren for her sick daughter. Back in Kaikoura, 25-year veteran real estate agent Joe Van Rooyen shows us through a beach road rental he's just sold since the quake for $280,000. Pretty much unchanged from pre-quake prices. And Mr Van Rooyen is noticing a new source of demand after taking calls from investors in Christchurch.
He had a good conversation with one of them. He said he'd bought several rental investment properties in Christchurch and done very well out of it. And he wanted to be in quickly here and do the same.
Of 10 other deals Joe Van Rooyen had on the go when the quake hit, 3 have gone through, but 7 now need more work done on them. A big commercial deal he won't talk much about just got an engineer's sign-off for the property. And in another, for a cafe in town, the Australian buyers are now renegotiating as the income forecasts have changed. Local bookkeeper John McDonald, who's heading up the Professional Services Business Recovery Group, describes it like a fairground ride.
Basically, the merry-go-round has stopped and everybody's got off, and now we have to work out how to start the merry-go-round up again and get on with business. So that's the plan going forward, about how do we get it started again.
Back in Oraro, Colin Hensley guesses his house's value may have fallen from $170,000 to $150,000 or $140,000. Another there who's looking to sell is the 74-year-old fire chief, Vern McAllister, and his wife Sally, who had aimed to take off touring in their 6-metre caravan, trout fishing. I ask if he thinks the quake may have shorn 10 or 20% off his home's value.
Well, I really can't say. We're selling because we want to have a look around the South Island, and maybe in the winter we'll go north. But we absolutely love it here, so we're under no pressure to sell. We're very happy to stay here another year if it takes that long to settle down.
In Kaikoura, a few metres across Beach Road from where we meet Joe Van Rooyen, the real uncertainty begins. Here is where Lynn Hastie lives, and the low-lying land has subsided the most. Mr Van Rooyen says thoughts are already turning to confining any new building to the higher, rocky land above the hospital, but that geotechnical reports are crucial. For Checkpoint, Phil Pennington.
And throughout this region, GNS scientists are poring over the freshly ruptured Kekerengu faults. They're looking for evidence of previous earthquakes and hoping to discover what it might mean for future events. Now, our reporter Tracy Neal is there, and she spoke to Russ Van Dissen of GNS on the site of the fault near Ward.
Right now we're standing on the 2016 rupture of the Kekerengu fault. The Kekerengu fault is the major player of the plate boundary through this part of New Zealand, but why we're specifically at this site is that just 11 months ago, January 2016, myself, Professor Little from Victoria University and other colleagues actually were studying the fault at this location to find out how often it makes big earthquakes. This was before the one that just happened, and the results of that work were that we found out or determined that this is one of the most active faults in New Zealand. It makes big earthquakes about every 400, 300 years. So we had found this out with our geological studies prior to the earthquake that just happened. We knew that it was an active fault capable of making big earthquakes. And we did that by digging holes across the fault, trenches. We've got a backhoe excavator here, and then we make detailed maps of the trench walls, is what we call them, and can map the different layers that are offset or not offset. They were peats, they were plant material. Sorry, and okay, and we dated the materials with radiocarbon dating, and that's how we pieced together the history of the fault rupture here. And when I say big ruptures, it just they would have been similar to the ruptures we had right now. And three of them in the last 1,200 years, now 4 in the last 1,200 years. So it was, in some respects, it was very rewarding to have done the work, understood that this fault was quite hazardous. Prior to this, we had we had assessed that it's in the National Seismic Hazard Model, is that the building code's based on as a very active fault. So the buildings around this area knew the strengths, the loadings the buildings had to be built to incorporated a fast-moving, very active fault. So in some regards, in many regards, at least where we're standing, we got it right. Where we studied, the trench is only 20 meters long, and 100% of the rupture went right through it. So we captured, the fault ruptured where it has ruptured in the past, and that's where we were working.
Russ Van Dissen of GNS talking to our reporter Tracy Neal, who was also filming that, and you could see the land there, and it just looks like some giant creature has had a tantrum and torn it up. Quite remarkable land damage. The police officer in charge of an arrest that saw officers use pepper spray, tasers and police dogs says he left his team leaderless after getting glass in his eye. 4 police officers are on trial in the Napier District Court where they've denied assaulting Gregory McPeak with a weapon. Our court reporter Edward Gay filed this report.
Sergeant Glenn Burrell said he considered calling the Armed Defenders Squad to arrest Gregory McPeak, who had just seriously assaulted his elderly father with a baton-like weapon, but he didn't believe they had enough information. The officer with 18 years' experience told one of the officer's lawyers, Jonathan Krebs, that he'd been told Mr McPeak was suicidal and could have a crossbow.
You would feel well qualified to agree, I expect, that the combination of a big chap intending to kill somebody and having a lot of alcohol on board presents a very serious risk situation, doesn't it?
Well, most definitely.
He also gave a glowing report of the officers on trial, including this one.
Yeah, fantastic man. Sometimes I think he's too nice to be in the police, but he's certainly, he's out there doing the hard yards all the time. He's an energiser bunny.
Mr Burrell's offsider on the night was Acting Sergeant Glenn Baker. Mr Baker went to the scene and was the senior officer on the ground after getting a briefing from Mr Burrell.
I reiterated to the entire team at the briefing that I wanted it to be a gentle approach, as at the time of the information given to me by the traffic car, we didn't even know if the subject was in the vehicle.
He said once police found Mr McPeak parked on West Shore Beach, he told Mr McPeak between 15 and 20 times over a loud hailer that he was under arrest and to get out of his car. Mr McPeak's reaction was to turn up his radio. Mr Baker said he directed 2 teams of 3 officers to approach the car from each side and to get Mr McPeak out, but the doors were locked. Officers smashed the windows, used pepper spray and fired their tasers before the police dogs were set loose. But under cross-examination from one of the officers' lawyers, Susan Hughes QC, Mr Baker confirmed there was no real plan.
So you accept that you did not have a plan beyond voice appeal and smashing the windows?
No.
You hadn't allocated tasks to individual officers?
No.
That by involving yourself in the proceedings, you effectively took yourself out of proceedings by virtue of injuring your eye?
Yes.
And that you left, therefore, 6 officers independently, one from the other, doing the best they could in the circumstances?
That's correct.
The questioning continued.
And do you consider that on that night that you led your people as you should have?
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Yes.
Based on the information I had at the time and the actions that Mr McPeak took, I thought the circumstances played out as they had to.
Right.
Mr McPeak was eventually pulled from the car and landed on the ground face first. He died at the scene despite efforts by the officers to save him. The courts heard that the actions of the officers did not cause his death. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi ko Edward Gaiaho.
Hundreds of people have gathered at a marae in Tauranga to farewell a Maori leader described by one mourner as an old soul in a young body. Tauranga Moana iwi are mourning the sudden death of Awanui Arangi Black, a te reo Maori advocate, Bay of Plenty regional councillor and a tribal ambassador. Our Maori Issues correspondent Mihi Narangi Forbes reports.
Awanui Arangi Black was escorted onto his marae with an impressive porphyry complete with taiaha-wielding warriors dressed in blankets, an appropriate display for an expert in the art of Maori weaponry. Wailing sounded out from the veranda of the meeting house as women and kuia expressed their sadness at the loss of one of Ngāti Pūkenga's instrumental leaders. The chief executive of Ngāi Te Rangi and close friend, Paura Stanley, said Mr Black's death yesterday at the age of 48 has come as a big shock to people.
He was a legend. He was our next tier, right? Everybody was looking to him to carry that mantle forward. But I've worked in every facet of that with him since the mid-1980s. And we started off together in Kapahaka. Oh man, what a man.
Mr Stanley and Mr Black were whānau and friends.
Yeah, on a personal level, you know, my heart is just breaking. It's in pieces at the moment. It's lying on the floor. I love my boy.
Earlier this year, Mr Black joined RNZ for an Anzac Day special program where he commentated on Tauranga Moana's 1863 Battle of Gate Pa, Pukehinahina. He led the Tauranga iwi response to the Rena disaster and was the treaty settlement negotiator for his iwi Ngāti Pūkenga. He also had Ngāi Te Rangi, Waitaha, Ngāti Ranginui and Ngāti Raukawa ki Ōtake iwi affiliations.
The legacy he'll leave behind is he's got that many skills. He had that many skills and such an old soul. He had so many skills that I'm hoping that he actually fed them out to anyone who wanted to learn. He was that sort of a person, humble, and he wasn't frightened to be told off. And that's the mark of humility. That's who Awa was.
Mr Black was known as a quiet educator and was a contributing author of one of the first Maori language dictionaries, He Pātaka Kupu. He held many governance positions and was a Maori language commissioner. He also had political aspirations, standing in the Tauranga general seat for the Maori Party twice. Awanui Arangi Black is survived by one daughter and 4 sons. E ahua moi mai e roto i ngā ringaringa o te atua. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko mihi Ngā Rangi Forbes, ahau.
Kia ora mihi. It's just coming up to 27 minutes past 6. We're going to end tonight with a highly unusual story that has just come to our attention and just come in. It's a rampaging goat which has been tasered by police in Oamaru. The goat, which had been disrupting traffic on State Highway 1, and we all know State Highway 1 has had enough of being disrupted in the South Island, was cornered in a garage by a dog. Oamaru hotelier Paula Brown spoke to our producer Bridget Burke about what happened when she found the goat this morning.
I was walking the dog like I normally do every morning. And we were walking past the front of our motel. The dog started going nuts, and I just thought it was a dog or something in the flax. And then we had a look, and I looked closer, and it was a big hairy goat with big giant horns, but it looked dead. So I called animal control. She said she'd be there in half an hour. We were a little worried because it's on the main highway. The lady arrived, and she came and asked for some bread, and we gave her some bread to help coax it out. It wasn't moving at all. And then when she threw the third piece of bread, it just bolted and ran across the highway. And, it was just chaos from then on. Cars swerving, and then it's running along the medium strip, and then it ran into property. But anyway, I locked it in someone's yard, and I thought, all good. And then it came running out the other side, on the other side of the house, and bolted back across the road, and it did it about 4 times. And then the police arrived, and they were running all over the place. and chasing it through the yards, and it scaled. Crikey, what was it? It was a 6-foot fence, and they'd lost it. It was in the middle of a block of houses in the street, and I thought, well, I better come back because we have a motel to run. And then we later heard that they found it had gone into an old lady's garage and broken up a few bits of things, and a little dog had cornered it. And they took care of it.
Well, I understand the police had to actually taser it.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say that.
Yes, and I'm also hearing reports that actually, unfortunately, this goat has been euthanized.
Yeah, they tranquilised it and had to put it down. It was a wild goat. So, then we found out it had been wandering the train tracks a couple of days earlier. So the poor thing would have been out of its mind with the traffic and being in the city. Because, it was a male goat. He was smelly, so he was in breeding season. So obviously something pulled him into town. And, he would have just gone crazy, I would have thought, with all the cars going everywhere and not been able to find a safe place.
And on that thoroughly surreal note, we end Checkpoint for tonight. Thank you for being with us. We will be back, minus the smelly goats, tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The police are allowing some people back into their homes near the Ravensdown fertiliser plant south of Napier, where a toxic fire has been burning for the last few hours. The Deputy Police Commissioner says no officers have been diverted from organised crime to respond to burglaries, as an officer has claimed. The Prime Minister is considering a request to meet with the families of the 29 men who died in